You're listening to What's the Difference podcast, featuring stories of individuals living with a wide variety of disabilities, created and hosted by Jackie Rosen and brought to you by Tru Faces. To connect with us, you can find us on Instagram or on Facebook at podcastwtd or send us an email at whatsthedifferencepodcast@gmail.com. And to find out more about Tru Faces, visit trufaces.ca. That's trufaces.ca.
Well, it's been a while, but it's great to be back doing another season of What's the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Jackie Rosen. This is our third season, and things will look a little bit different this time around. First off, the amazing Miss Sarah is taking a break from co-hosting the season. She's been busy working on a project of her own, and she'll join us as a guest later on in the season to tell us what she's been up to. But this year, we have an entirely new co-host. I'd like to introduce Emilee Schevers, co-founder of the disability advocacy and awareness group, Tru Faces. I'm an ambassador for this incredible organization, and since great minds think alike, we've decided to partner with Tru Faces this season to bring you the best possible content with a variety of new voices sharing their experiences. Welcome to the podcast, Emilee.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be doing this and getting more involved and talking about some great issues. So I am 21 years old from Kawartha Lakes and the co-founder of Tru Faces, which is a disability advocacy organization created by myself and my sister. We both have disabilities. I specifically am legally blind and was born with a genetic condition called cone dystrophy, which has resulted in my vision being 20/200, and I have a lot of light sensitivity and no color vision.
Well, thanks, Emilee. We're looking forward to learning more about you as the season goes on. You'll hear more from Emilee as well as other Tru Faces ambassadors throughout the season, including two more who are coming up in just a few minutes in this episode. In the meantime, if you're new here, I will tell you a little bit about myself. I was born all the way back in 1984 in Toronto, and I was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect called tetralogy of Fallot with absent pulmonary valve when I was only 4 hours old. My parents were told I had pretty shitty odds of surviving my first night, but somehow I did make it through. Now, nearly 4 decades, 3 heart operations, more procedures than I have fingers and toes, and a long list of other related health issues. I'm still here and thriving. I have a career I love in the not-for-profit sector. I've been married for 9 years. I'm a homeowner, and I have a 2-year-old daughter named Hannah, which if you listened to season 1 and 2, you heard all about my pregnancy and birth experience. My heart condition will always require tune-ups, but I'm shocked my doctors, as it's been 14 years since my last operation, and I'm still going strong even after my pregnancy. Before rebooting my career in 2019, I was actually a news anchor on Toronto's radio stations, so I felt it was only natural to start a podcast, and that's why I'm here with you today. Before we get into the topic of this episode, I'd like to introduce 2 more Tru Faces ambassadors. You'll be hearing a lot from them this season. First, we are joined by Jess Eaton in Vancouver, who has quite the story of survival herself. Jess, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
I would love to.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jess, and I'm an interracial Chinese-Canadian adoptee adopted under the one-child policy in China, where parents were only allowed to give birth to one child. But I'm currently in remission from complex chronic illnesses such as Lyme disease, POTS, vestibular concussion, whiplash. There's like a lot of things. I don't remember them all, but I'm in remission because I had a life-saving spinal surgery that I had in India, Mumbai, India, about a year ago. So I'm finally excited to be very much alive and not dead, and on this Tru Faces Ambassadors program and this podcast to join other incredible disability advocates in my advocacy journey.
Thank you, Jess. We're so looking forward to learning more about you and hearing more about your own story in future episodes. And last but not least, we are going over to the opposite coast of Canada, to Halifax, and we are introducing Jenna Kedy. We're so glad you've joined us, Jenna. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So thank you for having me. As stated, my name is Jenna Kedy, and I am an 18-year-old chronic illness warrior all the way from the east coast of Canada, living in Canada's ocean playground of Nova Scotia. And I've lived here my entire life, and so have my parents. I'm pretty boring. I'm a 4th generation. And I am a cheerleader and a ICU world champion, as well as I am representing Team Canada for the second time at the ICU Cheerleading Worlds in Florida. I have quite a long experience with sports as well as disabilities, and I'm just going to be starting university this fall to pursue a degree in family studies, which I'm pretty excited about. And disability advocacy and awareness is a huge part of my life through working with Tru Faces, as well as I run a blog called Spoonie Spills, and I volunteer quite a bit at my local children's hospital where I grew up receiving most of my pediatric care. My main diagnoses are juvenile arthritis and fibromyalgia. I started my chronic illness journey when I was only 11 years old, so I've been around the block for a few years for just a young age, and I'm super excited to share with you and have you listen.
Thanks, Jenna. We're so glad that you can join us this season. So today's topic is actually something I personally know absolutely nothing about or have no personal experience with. So I'm really excited to learn about it from our panel today. We're going to be discussing integrated sports opportunities and what exactly sports look like for people with disabilities and comparing it to mainstream sports with disability sports. So Emilee is an expert in this topic. I'm going to let her take this away right now.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to do a lot of talking about what both sport experiences look like separate and together, and what we're hoping the future of sport looks like for people with disabilities. And I'm super excited to get into this and hear from other people's perspectives about the sport industry as somebody with a disability, as well as share some of my own.
All right, so we're going to be speaking to our virtual panel, virtual because we're doing this over Zoom. So I'm going to ask the first question and our panel will answer. When did your sports journey start and what did that look like? So we'll start with Emilee.
I feel like everybody gave really great introductions, but you're going to learn a lot more about me as we get into these questions. And for me, I'm somebody I've always been really active. I always loved playing sports, and I played a lot of sports with my sighted peers and played a lot of those sighted sports. I was really heavily into gymnastics. I even coached for 4 years and I played soccer. We decided that I should stop playing soccer when I broke my fourth pair of glasses, though. So that wasn't such a success for me. But I loved just being active and getting my energy out in some way. I was first introduced to a blind sport in grade 6 by a teacher who ran a fitness program instead of gym classes and wanted to teach other students about, what it was like to play an adaptive sport. And that was kind of my first introduction to it. But always being active, always getting out there, and having a lot of different experiences in different sport settings.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a person with an acquired disability. So I just grew up with since I can walk, like my parents tell this story when I was 2 years old, I would be kicking around a soccer ball and they swear, even though I was only like 2 years old, it would be glued to my legs. And I was multi-sport athlete doing like gymnastics, swimming, soccer. And in high school, I just dove right in and tried to do every single sports I could do that was like ever given and provided. And it wasn't until I got my brain injury from sports, from a free kick in soccer that hit me in the head, gave me a whiplash and concussion, and that went undiagnosed for a couple of years. But that's kind of how it started, and it kind of ended around when I was 14 years old, and that's when it kind of tapered down with my disability.
So I was always interested in sports from a really young age, as I did like rec programs and camps where we would explore different types of sports. I also had a very artsy side growing up, so I wasn't always super into sports all the time, but I always had it in some capacity in life. From grade primary all the way up to grade 12, I always enjoyed gym class and had a lot of fun doing it, even right to the fitness tests and all that stuff we had to do that most people complained about. I actually really enjoyed it, and that's surprising for someone that deals with complex pain and arthritis. And I did a lot of rec sports, so I did a lot of dance and gymnastics, and I always loved sports that involved music and glitter and costumes. Those are the things that I more gravitated towards because I was able to express my athletic side as well as my artistic side in those types of things. And my childhood best friend, who was also my neighbor at the time, joined cheerleading. And I had always seen cheerleading in like the stereotypical movie Bring It On, which definitely does not showcase the cheerleading that I learned about. But I always loved like all the glamour and all the things that had to do with it. So my childhood best friend brought me to her cheer competition. I fell in love, like came home and instantly told my mom about it. And so my mom wasn't fully ready to commit right away, but she did sign me up for a recreational cheer camp at the gym that I actually still cheer with now. And I really loved the camp and I bonded really well with all the other kids and the counselors. And then after that summer actually is when my health kind of took a turn for the worst and I started developing arthritis and a lot of things came after that. Luckily, through the first couple of years of arthritis, I was still able to continue recreational sports, but competitive sports was just too much of a commitment to when I had so many unknowns in my life. But then when I was 15, I made a commitment to myself that I really wanted to get back into sports. I had a very hard time due to my chronic pain that year of my life, and getting to school was even challenging a lot of the time. So I made a commitment to myself that I wanted to get back on track. I wanted to get my mental health better. So I decided to join cheer in July of 2019 when I was 15, and I've been doing it ever since and have absolutely fallen in love with everything to do with my sport. I've even gotten my course to be credentialed in level 1, and I just can't say enough good things about what cheerleading has brought into my life. And I love being a disabled athlete and be able to promote that advocacy that people with disabilities like myself can do big things even within extreme sports like cheerleading.
You guys are all amazing. I mean, my literal experience with any sports, no sports, exercise, period. I never even set foot in a gym till I was 35 years old. So I'm impressed by all of your backgrounds right now. And I definitely want to know more. So what was your experience with mainstream sports versus disability-specific sports? So Emilee, I'll start with you.
So as I was, doing gymnastics and then eventually coaching gymnastics, I was only ever doing sighted sports until about grade 12 when I started getting more involved in the blind sport community. I started competing in goalball and even competed on the junior national team for Ontario, as well as in tandem track cycling, where I have 2 provincial gold medals. So I worked my way through sighted recreation sports all the way up to competitive disabled specific sports. And to be honest, I actually didn't realize how inaccessible my mainstream sport experiences were until I played my first blind sport. I actually stopped doing gymnastics and became a coach because I didn't feel like I was going to thrive in the competitive environment which I was offered. So I moved to coaching in hopes that, I could support other children with all different abilities in the rec program to feel like they belonged. Because truthfully, I didn't feel like I belonged. When I was asked to run at a vault full speed when I couldn't see it coming and then I would hesitate to jump, I was yelled at and I was shamed for not being able to do it. And my coaches were getting frustrated with me because they couldn't understand my sight in that case. And I couldn't explain it to them because I was so young. So when I was introduced to goalball, a sport designed specifically for athletes who are blind, everybody wears a blindfold and it's a game of sound essentially. I was absolutely impressed and truly thrilled to be a part of such an incredible community of athletes who were given all of the resources to be able to thrive in a supportive environment. And it was actually the first time I really felt like I could be successful in sport. So, as I mentioned, I did recreational able-bodied sports for a good 15 years of my life. And within 1 year of being introduced to a disabled specific sport, I was already getting into the competitive aspect. I was already training for it. I was being so much more involved than I ever was in recreational gymnastics and the other sports like soccer, that I really just felt like I had the opportunity to be there and to thrive and was offered the right resources for it. So I had more positive experiences in disabled specific sports than I did in mainstream sports. But I am thankful for both opportunities, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more later.
Yeah, Emilee, hearing your experience with the sighted sports versus the blind community is very interesting to hear about your experience with sighted sports versus in the blind community specifically. Because with my experience with being a high intensity sports athlete with being in the ultimate frisbee community on national level and metro soccer, which is pretty high with metro following fusion to the Whitecaps in terms of rank and stuff. I was playing 5-7 days a week. All of a sudden my brain injury had a cascading effect and I wasn't able to continue at that pace anymore. I found there was a lot of ableism in just in that community in general, because I was able to perform at this level. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't participate in the way I had before. So I had to drop out, and everyone was so concerned in the reason why. But at that point, since I had been undiagnosed and we had no idea what was happening, like it was very confusing for all of us. And I find that my parents, I guess, were the ones who had found most difficulty in it, and my coaches in general also had a difficult time in trying to push me and trying to convince me to come back and trying to push me beyond my limits. It's a different experience that I find that most of you guys have probably had, but I'd be so interested to hear what you have to say, Jenna.
So I started my sports journey in regular mainstream sports. So I was in like my rec camps and all of that I did growing up. A lot of them I even did before diagnosis. So it was all sport that kind of mixed everybody together. It was all different types of kids all together. When I started cheerleading, I was just started in mainstream all-star. So I was with all different types of people. The cheer gym that I joined was luckily very accepting of all types of people with disabilities. And my coaches were some of the most supportive, accepting people I'd ever met. And they really put pride into making the team acceptable and accommodating for my needs as someone with a chronic illness. And there was a few other people actually on my first ever cheer team who also struggled with different types of chronic illness. So my coaches and the board of directors really put acceptance at the forefront of their values in the gym. And I think that really showed in helping me fall in love with my sport, because I never felt left out or an outcast or not accepted or not welcome in the gym. And I always felt like I could be my best self in the gym and ask questions and that I would be validated. And that was so powerful. It was my second year of cheerleading. One of my coaches that had coached me both of those years had mentioned to me that they had a adaptive abilities team. And I had actually never really heard of adaptive abilities. I knew that my cheer gym used to have a special needs team, as well as other cheer gyms around my city have special needs teams. And I thought that that was really cool, that that was something that they did. But then my coach told me about adaptive abilities, and it was something that my cheer gym was starting to get really, really big in. And adaptive abilities basically means it combines both people who are able-bodied and people with disabilities. Cheerleading is a pretty accepting sport too, because to be a disabled athlete, it's one of the most widest umbrellas of the different disabilities you can have. Whereas some sports make it a little bit harder because they only allow certain types of disabilities. So when my coach had told me about this, I said, yeah, I'd love to join. I didn't even have to try out my first year, because my coach saw in me that I'd be such a great fit for this team. And then we became Team Canada, which was such an amazing experience. We went to Worlds last year in Orlando, Florida, which was absolutely surreal. I got to bond with people from all over the world, as well as other special abilities and adaptive abilities teams that were from across the globe, which was such an interesting experience to get to know disabled and able-bodied folks who also love cheerleading from around the world. And I competed on the world stage, and we took home gold, which was a crazy experience because adaptive cheerleading is sort of a new thing. So it was really history in the making to be one of the first teams in that division to ever take home gold, as well as at the moment, we are the first and only cheer team from Atlantic Canada to ever place gold in a world competition. So that is such a cool title to feel, that we are the first of hopefully many Atlantic Canadian cheerleaders who will take home a world title. And it was just such a crazy experience that as someone with a disability, I was able to do something like that and be a part of a group of girls that were really so loving and caring and wanted to just be together and accepting. And it created such a great sense of family. And then this year, when I was going into college, I knew my life would be a little bit busy. So I had to take a step back from mainstream cheer, and now I just focus on adaptive abilities. Such accepting hearts.
I love how passionate you are when you talk about that.
You know what? This kind of leads into our next question, because you're talking about adaptive abilities, Jenna. And our next question, which is mainly for Emilee, is kind of what's it mean when you say integrated sport versus an inclusive sport?
Yeah, so as somebody who is an athlete, part of my sport identity has actually worked up to coaching. So I mentioned I coached gymnastics, but more recently I have coached things like blind soccer, which is a personal fave of mine. Personally, I don't want to play it. I don't want to run around with a blindfold on. That scares the crap out of me, but I love coaching it and teaching people those kind of skills. And something that I've been working on and have learned a lot about is just working on sport development programs and what sport looks like for people who are blind. And essentially, we've been talking about it. We have this mainstream sport, which we can think of as like able-bodied sport and your competitive varsity teams, your Olympics, mainstream sports for able-bodied athletes. And then we kind of talk about disability-specific sports, goalball, blind soccer, blind hockey, adaptive cheer teams, things that are made for people with disability. And as I'm working on sport development programs and working on opportunities for people with disabilities in the sport world, why do we have these two categories? Why do you either play able-bodied sports or you play disabled sports? And why are disabled athletes only able to thrive in disability sport specific settings? Why are we only being given opportunities in these sport specific settings that are, here's a blind sport, here's a wheelchair sport, and essentially looking at removing these categories? Sport is just sport. So when we talk about integrated sport opportunities, it's not having these mainstream sports or specific disability sports. It's just sport. And when we talk about inclusive sport, people often are like, it's a wheelchair. We've created a wheelchair version of the sport. Therefore, like, it's an inclusive sport opportunity. And you're not wrong. It's great that we have these disability specific sports. They do allow for opportunities. But as somebody who grew up in a rural community, why do I not have the opportunity to play sports? Because there's no goalball team or blind sport team for me in rural Eastern Ontario. There just simply isn't. So therefore, I was deprived of these opportunities to be involved in sport and be successful in sport because of where I lived and because I had a disability. And so when we talk about integrated sport, we're saying take off the labels. Take off the labels and make adaptations so that everybody can participate with sport together. If I was to go to my elementary school and I was a student and we were playing soccer, we would be playing what right now is called sighted soccer or like able-bodied soccer, except maybe we use an audible bell. And the audible bell in the ball doesn't make it blind soccer, but it allows me to participate alongside my peers through a simple adaptation that now everybody can play, and my sighted peers aren't losing anything because of a bell with a ball, but I'm able to play alongside them. So allowing these opportunities where disabled individuals, especially think of children and students who aren't able to advocate for themselves on these issues, are able to participate with their peers in meaningful settings. Because if those disabled specific sport opportunities aren't there for students and kids who need them and are going to thrive in those sport settings, then they're simply not going to be able to thrive like myself. I didn't get to compete in a blind specific sport unless I was 2.5 hours away from where I lived. I had to drive 2.5 hours to a competition minimum. And, if I want to go to a practice, I have to drive 2 hours each way, once a week to be able to go to a practice. And why are we not just allowing and thinking outside the box in creative ways of how we can adapt sports or how we know to adapt sports? If you have somebody who's in a wheelchair and you want to play a class game of basketball and you want to include this one person, have everybody sit in chairs around the gym and have to pass the ball back and forth without moving or running around, or have them use like scooter boards so they're kind of moving around in similar ways, so that it's not just removing the disabled person from the sport area and it's not just making it specific to them. It's allowing everybody to play together. And I don't think there's any better way to word it.
That's such a good point, Emilee. And I was thinking of a couple things while you were saying that. The first is I don't believe that there should be a division between men and women's sports. I mean, especially, I don't think there should be anything that's gender specific. Just all genders should be able to play one sport and not be segregated into two groups that are binary. And I think that in some cases, what it is that there might be fear on the other side that's preventing that integration, that people might be thinking, what if, okay, for example, if I were to play a sport like football. What if Jackie has a heart attack because she has a heart condition? Well, we can't let her play. I'm not, somebody might say, I'm not ready to take that responsibility of what should happen to her if she gets injured or something like that. And she is more likely to have this, and this happen to her because of her heart condition. So it's almost the same as like schools, going to a school that's specific for disabilities versus a mainstream school. And I had that experience. I'm sure we're going to talk about this in another episode. We did talk about it in our first season about how the principal of my elementary school didn't want me there because she wanted me to go to a school for children with disabilities. And my parents had to fight to get me into that mainstream school. So it's really interesting that you've brought this up.
Yeah, so in my experience with integrated versus inclusive sport, integrated sports is kind of what I participate in within adaptive abilities cheerleading. So, and in my mainstream cheer that I did, because my cheer gym and the cheer community that I live in is very, very accepting. Even just in Canada in general and around the world, cheerleading is one of the most accepting sports for people with disabilities, and we're able to accommodate a lot of people, which is so exciting in our sport. Wouldn't matter what ability you have, everybody gets to join in and have fun, and we can make adaptations to give people a chance to participate. Whereas I feel like inclusive sport would be just people with disabilities in a sport. And I definitely relate this back. Like when I was in elementary school, we had a learning center in my school that I actually volunteered in quite a lot because I had a lot of friends there. And I really enjoyed like volunteering with the children in the learning center even when I was little. In my experience growing up in Nova Scotia, just graduating last year, having those 13 years of school, we had everybody together in one school. In my opinion, integrated sports are better than inclusive sports. I know in some situations and some people may enjoy participating in inclusive sports more because they have their little community there, which they enjoy being with. But also it's nice, I think, to have sports that are integrated. For example, my cheer team, we do a session of inclusion training every year. So every single athlete on the team, whether you're disabled or not, has to participate in training to learn how to be inclusive and accepting of people. And I think that is really valuable, and it teaches people a lot of things. And also it just gives an opportunity for not only disabled people to participate in sport, but it also gives an opportunity for able-bodied people to learn about disabilities, raise awareness, make friends, and grow within their sport. Because adaptive sports do look different sometimes than your mainstream sport. So it gives those athletes that have been doing their mainstream sport maybe for a long time an opportunity to grow and learn something new, which I think a lot of people really enjoy, specifically within my cheer team.
I was just gonna say, sounds so fascinating, the differences between like what Jenna and Emilee have shared about their experiences, because mine, with the acquired disability, I just experienced like ableism and confusion. But all the things that you guys are saying, it sounds wonderful. And I wish this was more normalized across the sports community because there's so much ableism in there.
And I think the main thing that we all want to come to now that we're getting towards the end of this episode. So how do you each feel that someone can promote inclusivity in sports? And Emilee, we'll start with you.
I think in the short, talking about the different adaptations that we've come up with and the creativity around it and how we can promote those in, the mainstream sports settings, understanding the individualities of different participants, asking them what they need, what works best for them, and how they would like to be included. I know it's hard for some kids because they may not know what their accommodations are. So taking it upon yourself to learn about sport adaptations. Like I mentioned, if it's like you want to play soccer with your group and you have a blind student, Google the disability in the sport and see what adaptations are out there. It can be as simple as a Google search to find different creative solutions, or even just having conversations with your coworkers or people in similar situations, because they don't have to be drastic measures. For example, you could just tap on a basketball net using a hockey stick to make it an audible target. So it's all about being creative and reaching out to potentially sport organizations in your community. Email Tru Faces. We're always happy to chat sports, and really just create more opportunities where individuals with disabilities and individuals without disabilities just get to play sport, because at the end of the day, it is sport and everybody should be allowed to engage.
I think to promote inclusivity within anything, especially sports, is just to include everyone and like make people feel welcome and don't separate people just because of their differences, and just be kind to everybody and let people be a part of stuff. Because like I know a lot of people are really closed-minded and like don't understand, but like if you don't understand, it can go a long way just asking questions, reading a couple books, going on Tru Faces, going on my blog, Spoonie Spills, going on the internet, doing some Google searches. Literally nowadays, I think we have the most resources that we've ever had to learn things about disabilities, about chronic illness, about ways to be accepting. And honestly, just ask people questions about how you can best accommodate them. Because even though you might think you know everything, like everyone's so individualized with what they need. And even people that don't have disabilities may have various needs of what they need from you as a teammate or coach. So be accepting, ask questions. Don't think anything's a stupid question. This is something that my grandmother would say, nothing is a stupid question. You would be stupid if you didn't ask. So take that with you. Ask all the questions you can ask because it will make things better. Because if you don't know things, then you can be ignorant and not do the right thing. So be empathetic, be nice, and you'll be good to go.
I always love grandmother's advice. It's always appropriate no matter what the setting is, right?
Absolutely, Jackie. Absolutely. No, but I love what you guys have to say. I just like what you had to say, Jenna, is like it speaks to the inner child in me because I wish that my teammates were doing that to me when I was struggling. I wish that people were more understanding and asking questions and offering some sort of creative ways to make it more inclusive or figuring out how to make it more accommodating to me. I was playing at a higher intense sport scene, so I think there's less room for error at those top places, but the more you speak about it, the more I'm really enthused to hear about all the experiences you guys have and ideas how to make everything more inclusive.
So many interesting thoughts and ideas shared today on our very first episode of season 3. I'd like to thank Emilee, Jess, and Jenna for sharing their experiences and educating me on something that I really knew absolutely nothing about. Now, before we wrap up this episode, I'm just going to throw it back to Emilee for a moment. How could people find out more and support Tru Faces?
Follow us on all the social media channels at Tru Faces. That's TruFaces. And head over to our website to find more about some merch. Maybe grab yourself a hoodie or a t-shirt to promote that disability advocacy and start more conversations like this one.
That is awesome. So everyone go out and buy a Tru Faces hoodie before we drop episode 2. That's very important. That's everyone's homework, everyone who's listening. But that is it for episode 1 of season 3. Coming later this season, we're going to hear more about Jess's journey, and even later on, we'll be talking more about congenital versus acquired disabilities, visible versus invisible, segregated schooling, intersectionality, parenting, and adoption. So that's a lot of topics we're going to cover off this season. Until then, thanks for hanging with us, and we'll be back with episode 2 soon. Bye for now. You've been listening to What's the Difference podcast.
Thank you for listening to What's the Difference podcast. To hear all of our episodes, visit trufaces.ca/podcast.